My name's Layla Mackenzie Dallas, founder and CEO of DAR Global, and you are listening to the CEO Activist podcast. Today, I am joined by the tremendous Joon Dutton, Chief Executive of British Cycling. John has had 28 years plus working within sporting organisations, driving them to success at the helm. He's worked previously for PGA and the Rugby League World Cup 2021, and he joins me today to tell us all about his journey, where he is now at the top of one of our most well-known and well-loved cycling organisations. Not being biased, I'm here with one of my favourite human beings on the planet. His name is Joon Dutton. John, it is a pleasure to see you and to interview you again on what is our brand new podcast, the CEO Activist.
It's very exciting, Layla, and you are very kind. We've known each other for some time, so I'm sure the conversation will flow and we'll get into some really interesting and exciting topics.
We always do get into interesting and exciting topics, don't we? And today this is the first time that I've been to British Cycling, and the same with the team. Branding is superb. Very impressive site indeed, and amazing just not only to know you as a friend, but also to have watched the legacy of your personal journey, last 28 years, nearly 3 decades in sport, PGA through to the Rugby League World Cup 2021, which happened in 2022, and you still pulled it off. Now to British Cycling. Talk to us about how it has been over the last 6 months and give us a whistle-stop tour of how you came to be here.
Gosh, first of all, I'm in a really privileged position. I love sport. I love the things that sport are able to do in terms of reaching the population. And from growing up, I always wanted to be a professional athlete, a rugby player, ideally. I was never good enough nor brave enough. So sports administration has been a pretty good second best. So golf, football, bit of cycling, but then rugby league for the last 12 years and 5 months into my new role as Chief Executive for British Cycling. An absolute privilege. I had some amazing experiences, met some amazing people, worked around the world, but back here now in Manchester, which is also a pretty special place to me.
Again, I'm biased because I love Manchester, having grown up here. Well, grown up for a big portion of my life here in the north. I know we're both fellow lovers of the north, and so pulling into the train station this morning, I was like, wow, it's almost like coming back home. And I wonder whether that is how it feels to you, because you have a tremendous background and a very interesting personal background, which I'd love for you to almost go back in time and tell us a little bit about that as well.
Gosh. I mean, Manchester is like a magnet, and it's really interesting. I know we'll talk about social mobility, which is a personal passion of mine, the fact that where you are born plays such a pivotal part in your life. And I've had just an amazing background in terms of my parents, who always taught me about being determined and building resilience, playing sport, making friendships, and seeing some of the amazing things that sport can do, and then working in a professional capacity. So my life journey has been like everyone's. There are bumps in the road. I certainly learned a lot about myself on the Rugby League World Cup, a tournament that I'd worked on for 6 years and was postponed only two months out from delivery. But I also learned probably in that period that life's far more important than work, and we become better people by going through adversity. So that ability to build resilience, to have a sense of determination, and my role, I have a leadership role in sports administration. I'm not going to change the world, but what I can certainly do as a leader is show the natural attributes of standing up for what you believe in, being a role model, being an ally, and helping make opportunities better. I think from a life perspective, we can tackle inequalities through providing opportunity, and I've seen the power of sport and the role that sport can play in that.
John, thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to pick up on a couple of things you mentioned there when it comes to facing into adversity and resilience, because those things are far easier said than done. I think, obviously we spent time at number 10 Downing Street recently where we're talking about CEO activism. And I think externally, at times it's easy for people to think you're in a CEO role. It's a role where actually you're not facing into quite as many challenges or headwinds as you are. And the leaders of today and the CEOs that I see be most successful are those that really truly lean in to the challenges. They are there shoulder to shoulder with their team, as you were at the Rugby League World Cup and you are now in the new role. But those relationships, those friendships, that upward social mobility that you talked about, a key aspect of diversity, all critical factors that actually stand our future leaders in great stead.
Yeah, I think leadership is about fundamentally how you make people feel. And it's a big part of growing culture, getting people together, particularly when you're going to attempt something that's significant and different. I think we have to consider the world in which we live in. It probably has never been a more complicated place than it is at the moment. The lingering impact of the pandemic, war in Europe for the first time in our lifetime, cost of living crisis, soaring inflation. We can go on, and certainly leading a business now is pretty complicated. There are the geopolitical aspects, the socio-economic aspects that probably have always been there to a greater or lesser extent, but it feels at the moment like the perfect storm. So to get things done is hard, but probably just need to do things in a slightly different way. So I've talked a lot in my first 5 months about agility, about efficiency, about looking out for each other, looking after each other. And if you can create a culture within an organisation, it's so powerful when people feel together that you're on the same journey. You can see a clear direction of where you are heading, and also that you can actually have that positive impact on people's lives. So certainly from a social impact perspective, just getting out and being in communities and genuinely making a difference for the right reason. And if we can remove some of the barriers that still exist, go back to social mobility. I mean, it is just quite staggering in 2023 that some of the challenges that people face in the life in a developed economy. And if we can play a small part from a sport, from a cycling, previously from a rugby league, but primarily by just doing the right thing.
I absolutely concur. And you mentioned before the feeling of belonging and this almost innate togetherness. I remember in my early career walking into a room and having my hairs on my arms prickle up on my arms, back of my neck, feeling, oh my goodness, I'm not sure whether I belong here. Yeah. And I think that's something that you do so beautifully well through the power of leadership, but also the power of sport. Because to your point, this is something that inspires, it motivates, it enthralls so many people. And so getting out there into the community and driving that social mobility aspect up is really critical to be able to see the sport and the business to succeed, because actually in that success, it gives greater opportunity to many, many people, which is so desperately needed right now during what is, as you rightly pointed out, cost of living crisis, inflation, soaring, many other things. We really must pay attention to that, because it's a volatile, uncertain,
absolutely
unambiguous world that we live in.
It absolutely is. I mean, we've talked frequently about ED&I and belonging being the word that's missing, and the work of your organisation is a testament to your determination to change that and understand that belonging is really it's a powerful word, and when you get it right, it can remove those barriers, it can tackle inequalities, and they do still exist. And let's not pretend that we live in a perfect world, because we really don't. I think in sport we've seen some fantastic examples of belonging, being a part of success, and delivering, whether it's for a community, whether it's for a sense of identity from a national team, whether it's people place and civic pride, and we certainly saw that in the tournament we delivered. But I think belonging is a really important part of having difficult conversations and making sure that it's grounded in organisations and certainly some of the programmes that we would look to do. Cycling is a sport that can reach the whole population, and that belonging bit for me just keeps coming to the fore. But back to the world in which we live in being a tough place and at times being a really unfair place. So I think that we've all got to work as leaders. Look, we've talked, and I've spoken on many different panels, particularly on diversity, and said I am a white middle-aged man. And I can be part of the conversation as a leader. I can help make things better. Can't change who I am, and maybe I don't necessarily represent some of the communities in which we work in. But social mobility for me is the pivotal point of being born and living in the north of England, having some amazing experiences, but seeing the stark inequalities that still exist in the community in which I live in. And if I can play a small part in making that better, using sport as a power for the good, then I absolutely will. And I'm interested in many areas, Layla, of trying to use this opportunity, soft power and diplomacy, international relations, all the things that can help move the dial. Might only be in a small way to us here today, but to some people that you can impact and affect, then that's in a really significant way. I remember from a Rugby League World Cup perspective, we worked with an organisation who specialise in helping people in social care provide opportunities. And some of the small things, just the small things we did, that we allowed them a pathway to be volunteers at our event. And when I reflect back on that, that was huge. You put the individual at the heart of the things that we did from a leadership perspective. That was played an enormous part in self-efficacy and in helping give a positive experience. And maybe the small things create the biggest impact.
I believe they do. I like to call them inclusion nudges, because lots of little nudges versus one great grandiose piece makes a great difference. And, again, picking up on something that you mentioned there about being a white guy, I have to say it worries me a lot that white guys, in particular, chief executives and those who are in positions of power, are almost having to excuse themselves for being white men and for being, you mentioned role models. We like to talk at Dial about real models, because actually you're there, you're doing it. Those who are in the seats of power actually have far more capability to impact than those who, to an extent, are preaching to the converted. And so I'd love to hear your take on, number one, is there a time where you felt that you didn't belong? Obviously, you're from the north. We all know about the north-south divide, which is a very, very real thing.
Yeah.
But then also, your take on CEOs, white males. Obviously, we'd love to see more representation, and we've done a huge drive towards that. You attended our initial CEO activist event where we had 3 Steves. And I remember having, real fierce criticism for that, saying, why have you got 3 Steves? And actually, the answer I gave was, if you looked below the surface, you would know that Steve Ingham, only FTSE 250 chief exec in a wheelchair, paralysed from the waist down. Steve Morrell's, very sadly, 2 children with a combined mental age of 5, was widowed. Steve Rowe, former chief exec of Marks and Spencer's, another white male. Actually, the story of social mobility from stacking shelves right up the way to becoming chief executive, it almost takes away from the great journey, because we have individuals panicking about the weaponization at times of diversity and even ESG.
Yeah, and I've been in that position, Layla. I mean, the first thing, I find it difficult that anyone would criticise your work. It's always incredibly thoughtful, and just what you've described, you clearly put together people who had incredible lived experiences that were able then in a leadership role to help do something about those things. But I remember a conversation maybe a couple of years ago, and it was about racism. And I was told my view didn't count because I hadn't experienced that. I hadn't had that lived experience. And I found that really difficult because I knew I am who I am. I'm incredibly proud of my upbringing. And that's why social mobility is really important to me. But in a leadership position, being a role model, being an ally, being authentic are the things I am in control of doing that. And because now, after 28 years of working hard, I've reached a point in my career where I believe I have influence. I would love to be part of those conversations. So I think the weaponization, there's some incredibly difficult circumstances in society, misogyny, racism, homophobia, and that has filtered into sport. We see it in the news more frequently than I would hope to. But hopefully then people like myself who can understand what the issues are and actually do something about it. And we can talk forever. I'm a big fan of actions speak louder than words. And it is the actions that we take that will change the world, not just talking and feeling good about ourselves. But yeah, experienced situations where I felt really uncomfortable. I'm really proud of what we did on the Rugby League World Cup, where we said right at the start of the journey, we had no idea how we were going to do this, by the way, that we would put men, women and wheelchair athletes together on the same platform and everyone would be treated equally, whether that was the introduction of prize money, equalisation of participation fees, travel, accommodation, the venues that we played in, all the things that hadn't been equal before. We set out and said, we're going to change this. Now, that was really easy in 2015, 8 years ago, and we hadn't worked out how we could afford to do it or how actually we would do it, and it was quite hard. But just because it was hard didn't mean to say that we should put it by the wayside and just forget about it. And it's things like that you need to have role models, you need to have examples of where people have blazed a trail and actually done things. And one of the really amazing women that work with us always said, you cannot be what you cannot see. And I think that's true. And I think if you can get the balance of people that, like myself, white, middle-aged man who worked for 28 years in the sports industry, but I'm an advocate of change and an advocate of tackling inequalities, and then people that we can see being role models and that communities can associate with. And there's no magic wand. There's no easy answers to tackle some of these problems, but certainly having the difficult conversations and doing something about it.
I love that you talk about action speaking louder than words, because that absolutely was the case with the Rugby League World Cup. And it is far more challenging to do it than just to say it. And it's one of the things that I'm finding at the moment keeps me awake a little at night is I love the media, but I also appreciate and find it challenging that the media can be used for a huge power for greater good, but equally it can also perpetuate certain issues, and that if you're not in the position of a certain element of diversity and have had that experience, it's very easy to go, hey, this is what's being said, there's culture wars, whatever, on the front pages of newspapers, and then believing everything that happens or is said, when actually you scratch below the surface. We talked about a VUCA world before. This is a far more complex issue than I think really anyone understands, and that's me included. We are lifelong learners. We never will stop learning, but the whole thing is an evolution. It's like, saying, hey, culture, it's done. It's living, it's breathing, it's sleeping, it's eating. It is moving with every year that we are in business, with every year that we are alive. Yeah.
Well, first of all, VUCA exists. I mean, vulnerability, uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity. Gosh, every day when I turn up to work, all of those things. And it's harder. It's harder than it ever has been before. And I think some of the agendas that we have to tackle. So if we take one here at British Cycling, transgender and non-binary, which is obviously a societal problem, a societal issue. And we've had to apply that in the world of sport, and it's emotive, it's divisive. We, perhaps at British Cycling first time round, didn't really get it right. There wasn't quite a clear level of understanding, but we've had to find our way through that, and we've done that predicated on fairness. And some people will be really unhappy with the way that we've done things, but that goes back to leadership. You've got to be clear. You've got to have a sense of direction and determination, and our protocols around that were predicated fundamentally on fairness. But that's just one of the many issues now in society. And I think social media has perpetuated some of that, fake news, all the things that we have to deal with now that certainly when I was growing up, none of that existed. And I am of an age where I grew up without a mobile phone. I look at my two sons, and it's just radically different, the level of expectation on them, because we have all of this technology, some of it as a force for the good and some of it perhaps not. And we just have to find a way. It's, I remember, a couple of situations in my career where, I'm a pretty determined, pretty resilient person, but some couple of situations where, I just almost felt like giving up, and it took some self-reflection to think, well, stop feeling sorry for yourself, and you're in a role where you can actually do something about that. But we all encounter difficult times, and we all live in this incredibly complex society. But also, we can do things that are simply amazing, and we see, particularly in the world of sport, there's a Rugby Union World Cup happening at the moment. We saw the amazing Women's Football World Cup, tournaments like the one that I led on that was predicated on social impact in local communities. And so, if we can use those opportunities as a force for the good, we can definitely address some of the societal challenges that we face.
It's really powerful, everything that you've said there, not only personally, but also, I do share your fear actually with social media. I mean, I know I have a little boy who's 15 and a half months old now, and I remember being at secondary school, getting a Nokia and playing Snake and being like, oh my goodness, this is like the best thing ever.
I remember floppy disks. I'm that.
Oh yeah, I remember floppy disks. Wow, no, they're like it deserve a place in a museum now. It's crazy. But I'd love to pick up on something that you said there, and you shared some vulnerability, which I think is, again, personally, maybe not everyone would agree with me, but I think vulnerability is such a superpower.
Yeah.
And in particular, in a world where social media has risen to the point where I think this false perception of perfection has been held up there as something that we need to do, when on the flip side, our youth and our 5 generations in the workforce, in particular, the younger generations, are expecting CEOs and leaders to speak out on societal and social issues. Therefore, isn't it better to say, do you know what, actually, we've not got it right and we're putting it right, as opposed to fake news that says, hey, everything is glossy. We know it's not. And then before you know it, CEO or board comes tumbling down because there's been some massive faux pas. And there's plenty of examples that I could name there. And so I think the right way is this, beautiful power of vulnerability that you show, but also the look, we don't get it right all the time. And also, to be able to please every single person on the planet is always going to be impossible, because, to your point, this is very, very emotionally driven. We're entering into a space where each of us have our own lived experiences and each of us have our own opinions. So be it the transgender argument, be it, race wars, which and whatever, actually, there's always going to be a disparity between certain mindsets. And so, trying to make the best decision for social good is the right way.
I don't think perfection exists. I think if you chase perfection, you'll probably catch excellence, and maybe that pursuit of perfection has affected some of the things that we've been able to deliver. Vulnerability, I remember acutely about 3 years ago, and I had my check-in with my chair on my objectives, and he said, you're doing great, you need to show more vulnerability. And I went away slightly confused by that conversation, and I went and typed it into Google and looked up what vulnerability meant. I think the first thing that came up was expose yourself to harm. I thought, gosh, don't really fancy that. And it was only through some of the experiences, over the last probably couple of years, I truly understood that vulnerability is a superpower. And showing vulnerability as a leader, first of all, when you get things wrong, you've just got to front it up and hold your hands up and say, look, we've got it wrong, and these are the things we're going to do about it. I think you get found out if you're not authentic. Authenticity in leadership is really important to me. But that sense of vulnerability, when we turn up to work every day, whether we're working from home or coming into the office or out on the road, some days we feel better than others. Some days you just think, gosh, I'm not quite sure I've got the solution to this. And this is where you rely then on surrounding yourself with really talented people. And I use a football analogy all the time, that if a football team had 11 goalkeepers, they would lose every game. And you need to build a team that has a different mindset, that has different skills, that has different philosophies in approach. And I'm really enjoying that in my new role at British Cycling, because when you've got big problems to solve, whether it's financial sustainability, whether you're trying to grow commercial revenue, whether you're trying to diversify, you need to have that skill set. But vulnerability in leadership, if you didn't show vulnerability and you were always reaching for perfection, I think it's quite a fast route to failure. Again, particularly in the complex environment that we find ourselves in.
Absolutely. And sometimes the biggest learnings come from those failures
100%.
and the most almost enlightening moments come after the times where you feel, and I speak for myself here, where you feel, oh my goodness, hit rock bottom here, or something's happened, be it work, be it personal life. I think I mentioned my father passed away just over 3 months ago, and I really questioned my entire motivation for existence, frankly. And I think it takes those moments on life's path and journey to make you almost reset and go, actually, okay, pick yourself up, put your big girl pants on, or not get big girl pants in your case, obviously, but get back on the horse or get back on the bike and go again.
Yeah, life is complex, isn't it? And life at times feels really unfair. Whether it's the loss of a loved one or other adversity in life. But I genuinely think that adversity, it never feels like it at the time. You learn more about yourself through adversity than you do through success. And I can associate, with sometimes in my career, sometimes in my life, where you really have felt like giving up and just feeling sorry for yourself because life isn't fair. But they're the things, you can learn more about yourself in those moments than I think you will at any other point, as hard as it is.
So, John, I'd love to ask the question. You've very kindly shared and alluded to the fact that there were times that you felt, I've had enough, I'm going to give it up. Maybe I feel a little sorry for myself. Talk us through some of those times and what helped you propel yourself back into...
Yeah, I think the emotions at the time, so if we go back a couple of years in a professional capacity, feeling emotional, feeling quite tired, exhausted, feeling like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. And then that sort of leads to just feeling sorry for yourself. And you can see then the impact that has on the people around you. How then do you navigate through that? First of all, reflection. Just a new day presents an opportunity to reflect. And then secondly, surround yourself with really high quality people who will challenge you and will help get the best out of you by asking some really direct questions. And, for me, I am full of energy. I'm full of determination. I'm resilient. I'm resolute. I think I take from my parents. My dad was a teacher. My mum was a nurse. And just their journey to bringing up a family. And just get on with it. Don't feel sorry for yourself. There's no time for that. Just get on with it. And it's hard, isn't it? It's hard at times when you're full of all that thing. You're in a sense of expectation more as a leader. People are looking to you. I remember at moments during the pandemic where probably for the first time in my career when people asked me a question and I said, I don't know. I don't know the answer. And you could see that the sense of uncertainty really fueled anxiety and you could just sort of feel that bubbling up, and then everyone is looking to you for the answer. And then when you think, well, I don't really know, so I can do two things. Either one, I can pretend I know and take the organisation one direction, or number two, I can show that sense of vulnerability and say, look, I don't know. What I do know is that I'm looking out for you, I'm going to look after you, and we're hopefully going to get to the right place. But that personal adversity, I think my summary would be surround yourself. I call it a little board of directors. And if you have your own personal board of directors, make sure that they've got a different mindset and a different skill set, and they'd offer you really high quality advice. Surround yourself with your loved ones and the people that are most important to you in life. When I remember acutely, we were going to we did postpone the Rugby League World Cup after 6 years of my life, which became a personal obsession. and seeing the people that have worked so hard. And I said, look, I've gone as far as I can. I offered my resignation, and my wife turned around and said, what are you doing? What are you doing? You've worked for 6 years, and it might not be quite as good as it was going to be because you take a backward step, but just get on with it and enjoy, and as a leader, show those leadership qualities that can impact on other people. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for reflection, and I found more. I run really slowly, Layla, but I run, and I just find it. And I'm doing some more cycling as well. But I just find those moments where you can just take your mind somewhere else and clear it and think more rationally. Because when you're tired, when things happen to you, it becomes slightly irrational. But having that clearer mind and a sense of purpose, and my sense of purpose is just to come and make a difference. My whatever it says in my job description here, I have no idea, because my job description I've reinvented, and it says one line, and it's to make a difference. And might come a point where I can't make a difference, and then that's definitely time for me to move on and do other things. But whilst I'm here and whilst I can make a difference and positively impact on the things that we do and hopefully on people's lives, then that sense of determination will grow stronger. But I think you've got to go through adversity to find that sort of renewed sense of energy and purpose.
And a very strong wife helps.
Very strong wife who isn't afraid to tell you stop feeling sorry for yourself and just get on with it. And it's great. I mean, we all have different circumstances in our lives, don't we? But just my family. So sometimes it's that perspective, and sometimes I want to work 24 hours a day. I get a lot from working hard, and again, I think that's from my parents. But sometimes you just have to think, well, the most important thing in your life is your family. It's not work, and that perspective. So I think during the pandemic, we talked about the 3 Ps, which was prioritization, pragmatism, and perspective. And if you go back to those, so reorder what you need to do and make sure the most important things are at the top. Have that, just nothing's perfect, so let's just find ways to do things on pragmatism, and then that perspective, never forget about what the most important things in your life are. Why are we doing this? Why are we coming to work every day? Well, yeah, we can affect change, but also we want to look after our family.
Perspective resonates such a lot, and I know that it will with others who are listening into this podcast. And you mentioned your parents a number of times, which is so heartwarming. And for me personally, it's exactly it's why you work hard every day. That being said, love is universal, and so really, what are we doing it for? It's easy to become a workaholic, and there's many CEOs that I know who have, they almost put their sense of self-worth, and I think I've done it as well, put sense of self-worth in that same bucket as, working so hard it nearly kills you. But actually, if not for the family and for creating sustainable change for the future and for the people, then why do it? Do we want to be on our deathbed one day and not be, we're going to be thinking, we should just send that one more email.
Absolutely, 100%. And friends as well. We talked a lot about family, but I'll give you an example of a quite spectacularly wonderful human being, Kevin Sinfield. I think many people will appreciate Kevin's story, but his friend, Rob Burrow, has motor neuron disease, just a debilitating, dreadful disease, illness. And Kevin's done various fundraising things and came to me about 18 months ago and said, look, I want to run 7 ultra marathons in 7 days. Gosh. And I want to finish at the World Cup final at Old Trafford. Can you help? Yeah, of course we can. And Kevin did that, exhausted on the final day of the tournament. And he walked into the middle of the field, 67,000 people inside Old Trafford. And he said, look, we all need to be better friends. I'm doing this for my friend, and not a dry eye in the whole stadium, 67,000 people in true admiration of a truly wonderful individual. So it just shows family, friends, and doing things for the right reasons, but also using the power of bringing people together to change people's lives.
You said that so perfectly. And I've been reading a lot of late this book called Lost Connections, and how connections are really intrinsically linked with motivation. And you've covered so many of them there. Is the connections with with nature, the connections with people, the connections with family, and all of those, have purpose, and diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity, culture, almost woven as a golden thread throughout all of those that make us want to get up, go to work, do what we do very best every day. And, what I love so much about our conversations, John, is you show just this incredible amount of humility and also modesty in talking and doing what you do, because, coming right back to the beginning of the conversation, actions do speak louder than words. And even the fact that you would offer a resignation, that you would sit as a chief executive when many people still think, oh, chief executives, they've got it easy. They have not, because you too are a husband, a father, a colleague.
Yeah, and also, I guess, a responsible human being. So some of the things that you just said completely resonate. The agenda around environmental sustainability, the agenda around travel, the agenda around health. I think we're on the verge of an existential public health crisis. So I think as human beings, we all have a responsibility to make the world a better place for us and our families right now, but also for future generations. And that's what I love about the role that I'm in. I can play a really small part, in some of that. And certainly, if I've got the chance of making a difference, I certainly will do. But it's just brilliant to have the opportunity to meet great people, to have difficult conversations, to engender that whole, what can we do? How can we make things better? And how can we do things for the right reason? Put our egos to one side and truly think about why we're doing things and having a purpose. That to me, Layla, perhaps is the most powerful thing in the whole world. I think if you have purpose, you have power. And everything I've tried to do in my career, certainly more laterally, is always come back to purpose. Always come back to, let's ask the question why. But we have a sense of purpose, that unifying togetherness of belonging. You can you feel like you can change the world. We might play a small part in it, but it's pretty powerful.
Love it. Purpose, power, prosperity. Lots of P's there. This is just a list tremendous.
Of pragmatism, prioritisation, and perspective. We'll have to maybe we'll go to a different letter of the alphabet. But purpose. You can see it. You can see many examples. You can see it on sports teams. I was speaking at a conference last week around well-being and trying to correlate how a sports team, any team, prepares, and the ones that are successful, and then move that into a leadership and into a business culture environment. And you can see some of the things that you train, that you play, that you rest, that you then reflect, and then you go again. Well, that happens in successful sports teams. It can happen in successful businesses. It's fascinating and unquenchable even after 28 years. I just love learning. I love meeting people, interesting people from different backgrounds, and learning. And gosh, anyone that says that you can't learn something new every day is just wrong, because you absolutely can.
I can see the twinkle in your eye when you start talking about sports and the power of sports to change the world. Before we wrap, I would love just to ask your thoughts around CEO activism and why others should join the CEO Activist Council, plus what CEO activism means to you and why we should put the S in ESG.
Yeah, it's probably just the summary of the conversation that we've had. I mean, why wouldn't you, if you're in a CEO role and you've got the opportunity to affect change and be part of that big conversation, why wouldn't you? What I've loved so far about being part of the group that you've assembled is some amazing people from different backgrounds who are prepared to have the difficult conversations and try and figure out how we can affect change. And I think that, the social fabric, whether it's social mobility, social impact, the society that we live in, we should all be responsible and have a part to play. And I think along the journey, other CEOs can have a bit of fun, meet some wonderful people, be part of something that does have a purpose, a strong purpose, and that sort of belonging together. I would advocate anyone that has the ability to play a part in your successful journey to come and join the journey, and there'll be some bumps in the road, but again, that's if it was all straightforward and all really easy, we probably wouldn't even be having this conversation.
Exactly. And what a journey it is, what a journey it will be, and what a tremendous journey you have been on. John, thank you so much. I have learned so much. Every time I speak to you, I learn more. I think that we should speak more frequently, even more frequently.
Sounds good to me, Leila.
Than we do. But purpose, social mobility, sport as a power to drive not only engagement but also better communities, better societies.
Absolutely.
And sport is something that we as business leaders and people can learn a huge amount from. So John, thank you so much. Really excited to have a look around as well, the velodrome. So thank you again. And
My pleasure.
is just a joy to know you and have you part of the CEO Activist Council as well.
Thanks, Leila.